I'm Austin Westfall. Tonight, new reporting from Axios, pulling back the curtain on a private Trump-Netanyahu call that helped set the Iran war in motion. On February 23rd, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called President Trump with intel saying that soon, Iran's supreme leader and his top advisors were all set to meet at one location. Trump was already leaning towards striking Iran, but he had not decided when until Netanyahu called. Marc Caputo and Barak Ravid had the scoop for Axios. Marc is here with us. You know, Marc, we didn't know about this call until you reported it. What did the administration do after they got the tip?
Step number one for Donald Trump was to check it out or ask the CIA to do that. That was Monday, Tuesday. On Tuesday morning, the team around Trump had made the decision not to talk about this and not to talk about Iran in any great detail in the State of the Union speech. They wanted to lull the Ayatollah, his leaders, into a false sense of security that the attack wasn't imminent. And around Wednesday, Thursday is when the report came back from the CIA that, yes, these guys are going to meet in Tehran on Saturday morning. And Trump said, okay, let's go ahead. On Friday, it was really decision day. Around, I think it was 3:38 p.m., Donald Trump gave the final approval to basically push the figurative button to give it a go-ahead. And then early Saturday, the attack happened, and the rest is history.
At what point did the administration decide negotiations with Iran were not going anywhere? Was the diplomatic route still on the table even when Trump and Netanyahu knew that the Ayatollah was in reach?
I think it was less likely. That having been said, I asked the specific question of the White House and said, what if for some reason, some possibility, the Ayatollah on Friday had come in and said, wait. I'll sign any agreement you want. I'll do anything you want. I'll get it done. And the answer that was told to me is the Ayatollah never would have done that, so we're not going to answer that hypothetical. So it suggests to me that by the time Donald Trump, and probably around Thursday, had decided to go forward, that was essentially putting the unstoppable object in motion that sort of really began on Saturday morning, early Saturday.
Right. You know, you report that Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, they called Trump from Geneva after hours of talks with Iranian officials, and they told him negotiations were going nowhere. What about those talks led them to that conclusion?
There were a few things. One of the main things was, according to the Trump negotiating team, is they had offered the Iranians in Iran free nuclear fuel from the United States for them to use in a domestic and a civilian use energy reactor. And for other civilian uses, there's some agricultural ones and even some medicinal ones. And even though the United States had offered this free uranium, free enriched uranium, Iran had said no. So that's one thing that led the United States team to think that Iran was not interested in negotiating a real, true civilian nuclear program. They were buying time. The second thing is that when they asked Iran to give a document, a plan for how they would approach this, the levels of enriched uranium that Iran said it needed was 5 times the amount needed for a civilian program, and therefore would have been used, in the estimation of the United States, for military purposes. There's another. Iran was quickly building a type of centrifuge that helps it enrich uranium. And according to the United States, Tehran had one nuclear reactor that was only supposed to be for research purposes, for agrarian and medicinal purposes or medical uses. And according to the United States, the intelligence services had determined that this was basically a front that was being used to enrich and stockpile uranium for a military program. You add all of those things together, in addition to Iran quickly building its ballistic missile and its Predator, or better said, its drone program, it led the U.S. to believe these guys aren't serious about negotiating. It's time for us to attack them. Now, Iran has a different point of view. They're saying that none of this is true. And so I can't say who's telling the truth or who's not. What I can definitely tell you is that that call happened on Monday, February 23rd, that set all of this in motion. And by the time Donald Trump said, we're ready to go and let's do it, it was too late for anyone to pull anything back.
Axios says that the U.S. and Israel had considered striking a week earlier, but they postponed that for operational and intelligence reasons. What were the biggest factors in that delay?
Our understanding is weather. was one of the biggest ones, and they couldn't quite agree with Israel over how to do it, how to go forward, and a lot of that was just rooted in weather. People don't realize that in the end, even though we have all of these high-tech weapons and this ability to communicate via satellite, weather dictates a huge part of how battles unfold, the time of day and the like. One thing about the time of day, I should add, in Iran on Saturday morning, one of the reasons the United States thinks that this meeting happened still by the Ayatollah and his council was they were so accustomed to Israel and the United States bombing at night that they thought, or subliminally just believed, that they would never be struck on a Saturday morning, and that's indeed what happened.
So what are the main leads that you're tracking today? And really, what are you following as far as what are the biggest things, what are the biggest indicators that are telling us where this conflict goes from here?
I think the biggest thing for us to watch, we'd reported also first in Axios, that Donald Trump spoke to two leaders of the Kurds, the ethnic minority who live in northwestern Iraq. And they're also clustered in the mountains, and they have a large semi-autonomous region in Iraq, is Western Iran, and they have a large semi-autonomous region in Iraq. And a number of them have been agitating to take on the regime. The regime in Tehran has oppressed Kurds for many years. The most recent uprising over a woman refusing to wear her hijab, who was killed, was a Kurdish woman, incidentally. And there are some reports, we can't confirm them, that a Kurdish faction is a boots-on-the-ground military force that is starting to take up arms against the regime in Iran, and they're doing it under cover of the Israeli and perhaps U.S., but we can't confirm that yet, military actions, that is, under Israeli planes and bombings. If that happens, if there's an actual boots-on-the-ground force that's coming in from Iraq, that's a big deal, and it changes partly the complexion of the war going forward.
Marc Caputo's with Axios. Thanks, Marc.